and welcome to Superintendent's Roundtable. I'm Deborah Vinsel, CEO here at Thurston Community Media. Periodically, we invite the superintendents from the 4 large school districts to come in and talk to us about things that are happening in the school districts and education issues in general. We're pleased to have with us the superintendents at the table again today. Let me introduce John Bash from the Tumwater Schools, Brian Wharton from the Yelm Community Schools, Dick Cvitanich from Olympia School District, and joining us as a special guest today, Vicky Lamoreaux, the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning at the North Thurston Public Schools. So welcome and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us. It's been, let's see, about 4 months since we had you here at the table, so a lot has happened in the last 4 months. Our legislature obviously is still in session. Today is February 23rd. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening legislatively. There have been a couple of things bubbling. We know that the legislature is still trying to deal with the McCleary decision and do what the Supreme Court has required of them to do. The Senate has passed a plan talking about replacing levies with a standardized funding structure, and the House recently passed a proposal for $7 billion over 4 years, and the governor has presented something. So there's 3 plans on the table. Where does it stand? I'm going to start with you, John.
All right. Well, I think the accurate answer today is we don't know, because many of the concepts and ideas that have been presented are some very new and others opposite of one another. So across the party lines anyway, the concepts for how to solve the problem are very different, with one group continuing to insist that the money exists currently, yet that group doesn't provide details regarding how they would specifically go about robbing Peter to pay Paul, and the other side simply indicating we need to create new revenue, but again, not being very specific yet about how to raise that revenue. Until those details come out, I think it's difficult for anybody at that level or for school districts to truly pencil out, so how might that work or not work for local school districts. That said, it is as advertised that McCleary was predicted to be at the center of this legislative session. It certainly is, and with the media spotlight on this, we're at least thankful that this is the priority conversation this year. But the other thing that was forecasted was that it would take not only the regular session, but likely a special session, and it appears we're on track to be delayed. So I think there are some positive things that are in the pieces and parts. What remains to be seen is if February is the idea month, and that's how experienced legislators have described the process to us, and March is kind of negotiation month, we're really interested in next month, right, what we can expect.
March could be a very long month. Yeah. I would like to just ask anybody just jump into this conversation, because it's you know, it affects all of you, but you know, does anybody else have a different perspective about what's happening?
I don't have a different perspective than John. All 3 proposals, I'd love to be able to pick a little bit from column A, column B, and column C. Obviously the governor's plan more amply funds education, follows some of the things that have been planned over the last 4 years during the McCleary time. But there are also some things from the Senate plan that provide good definitions for us as we move forward. Don't think that it funds education amply at that point, but it really will be how many pieces of each of those plans come forward, or is it just a discussion and there's a 4th plan that comes forward? That's the part that leaves us in a little bit of a lurch as we plan forward. I think good news is that all 3 plans have a levy cliff solution. The difficult thing for schools is that doesn't appear to be forthcoming. One side wants to have it be part of a comprehensive package and deal with it all at the same time. Others want to deal with it sooner than later. We're getting to that point where we have to make some staffing decisions and some budget decisions for next year, and those are being impacted. So the stress is building on our employees that way.
And wasn't the levy cliff pushed back another year? Didn't we gain another year on that? Well,
no,
yes,
no,
no.
no.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
new. Okay.
Yeah.
And that, so for our viewers, can we just kind of loop back and define what that means? What is the levy cliff?
Well, the notion that school districts could have 4-year levies or 2-year levies to improve their academic programs has really driven what school districts have put before voters. And different communities will support different amounts of money. And some, without going into too many details, some of our school districts have grandfathered in. They have higher levy capacity than others. And as a result, they can raise more money. And what the legislators have a tendency to look at is teacher salaries and extra days. If you have more money, you can pay teachers for those opportunities. And the worry was going in that the legislature would try to address levies and how much extra money people could raise in their own communities to support their schools and what that might mean. And if that was reduced, what kind of effect would that have on collective bargaining agreements? What kind of effect would that have on how many staff members you would have? So our nervousness was really around if that money was reduced,
Restricted.
we'd have to be riffing staff members. And of course, I think that the Democrats have said, you know, we wouldn't mind extending this one more year. I think the Senate and Republicans would like to try to address it right away. Makes us nervous because if we don't have that action in March, we're building budgets, and will we have to have a reduction in force? Well, because that's where most of our dollars are being spent, is in staffing. So I guess from my perspective, I'm not 100% sure they're going to solve all of this issue, but I really would like some type of indication that we don't have to worry about that for one more year.
So the impact at North Thurston Public Schools of the reduced levy authority and the levy equalization, as well as the ghost revenues, is about $10 million in 2018 and about $9 million in 2019.
Wow.
So that equates to about 100 staff members.
And that's huge.
And that's huge.
Yeah, especially at this point in the calendar, because and we've had this discussion before, where you're all looking at your budget timeline, and that is, you know, breathing down your necks, and the legislature still hasn't taken action. So you have to, how do you base your budgets when you really truly don't know what's going to happen?
Right. Well, statewide, as we compare notes with our peers beyond this region, we're all operating with a similar strategy, and that is you create more than one, knowing that you have a levy cliff scenario where you do have to plan on losing what the legislature approved over a temporary period of time, and that was the levy lid. And the amount of money you could collect increased based on legislation that our lawmakers passed, knowing that school districts needed more money while they're not fully funding.
And 2017 is the last year for that?
2018
Oh,
is the
2018,
expiration
okay.
date, and so that's during our fiscal year, this
yeah.
coming year, and that's why everybody's scrambling now and saying, gosh, if they don't solve it. And so politically what you have are some people saying, well, we're not going to solve that first because then there's no motivation to solve the bigger funding issue long term. And others saying, well, if it's going to take a while, why would we cause all this harm out in our public schools? That seems to be at the heart of the political debate. And in Tumwater schools, for example, we're facing roughly a $1.8 million hit in our fiscal year next year, and the number goes up higher than that in the following year if they continue to have a protracted disagreement regarding how to solve the bigger issue.
And what about what do the dollar figures look like for you?
For us, it's 1.8 million in levy collections and another 800,000 in levy equalization in the first year, and then 2.2 million total in the following year.
Wow. And Dick?
Now we're about 3 total. But I would like to bring up one other point that I don't think has been talked about very much, and it's the conversation about kind of swapping out and then limiting what local levies can collect, whether it's 10% or whatever that magic number comes out to be. I have a really hard time believing that there are communities in this state that won't fundraise differently for their schools, and I haven't heard a lot of conversation about that. And depending on what your area code is, you have capacity to raise money locally. In fact, if you were to look at Seattle Public Schools, if I was up in certain parts of Seattle, elementary schools can raise $50,000, $75,000, and there are other parts of Seattle that you don't have the capacity to raise those dollars. And I think one way or another, people are going to have to come to grips with that issue, because people will they'll work around. If I'm living in the Lake Washington School District and I have wealthy families living in an upper middle class neighborhood, I can disproportionately affect what happens in my child's school in a very real way. I can raise $75,000 really quickly. I can hire a Spanish teacher for our elementary school. And we don't hear a lot of conversation around that. There are communities that can't raise money like that. So you're still going to have this inequity, and I have a hard time believing that people are going to want to let their schools kind of settle in one spot. And I haven't heard any conversation about what that looks like moving forward, because I know people will raise money for their schools to do different things for kids.
Right. They will, absolutely. Did you have something you wanted
Well, I
to
think
add?
the other stressor really at not solving this problem is attracting and retaining quality staff, because that's a critical thing for us here in the area, and I think statewide.
Okay. So that's the statewide picture. As we know, elections have consequences. There's obviously a new administration in the other Washington and a new cabinet, and very different perspectives on the federal government's role and responsibility where the big picture of education is concerned. How are those changes potentially impacting, and several executive orders that have come from the White House, so how are those changes potentially impacting your districts here locally? Anybody want to?
I can share two different examples of how we're experiencing an impact in Tumwater. With two executive orders, the first really involving immigration and the new administration's approach to that. And then the second is relatively recent, and that is an executive order removing federal protections for transgender students.
Oh, right.
And what it's creating is some fear and anxiety for our students and families in those protected groups who are contacting us. For example, we've had several of our Spanish-speaking families call us and ask if they should send their children to school, or if immigration authorities might be there to take their kids away. Or come in and ask for their address so that they can be brought in and deported. And of course, in public schools, we don't ask for citizenship information, and in our state, we're required to educate all kids. And so we've done our best to communicate widely to our families that their kids are safe and that we don't engage in those kinds of activities. But because it's all over the news, it's creating that kind of fear. And then for our transgender students, we're pleased with our new state superintendent jumping right on these issues. And statewide, he recently sent a message that we're utilizing in our district to let families know that the executive order around transgender protections makes no difference in Washington state, because we have a state law that continues to protect that group. So a couple of examples.
Yeah.
Two very similar examples in our district. A common scenario for us is students who aren't in a transitional bilingual program, but they have parents who speak a different language, mostly Spanish, at home. And we've had situations where our students have not wanted to reveal parents' name, address, phone number through routine school things like filling out free and reduced lunch applications, those kind of things. They're unsure, they're afraid to do anything that might jeopardize their family. And so just a lot of we're taking you in. You're our student. We care about you. We're going to educate you and your family to the best that we can. And also for our transgender students, I think that's been a very it's always been a difficult conversation, but just knowing that both the state and our school district has very strong anti-discrimination laws and policies that just says, please come to school, you'll be welcome here, and we'll educate you very well.
I just can't imagine that kind of a child, especially a young child like an elementary school child, feeling that they are responsible for their parents' safety. That is just an unreasonable burden to put on a child. So I just needed to share that. I just, Dick, I saw your message to the residents of the Olympia School District. All means all. Mm-hmm. So I know how are you all dealing with the things that have changed?
It's very similar to the other school districts in our region, and there's a very clear U.S. Supreme Court case in 1982 that protects the rights of students coming in to enroll in our schools, and this exists. It's on the books, so the way we treat students and the way we interact with families, frankly, doesn't change. It's what we've been doing all along. Our goal is that we know kids can't learn if they don't feel comfortable and safe. We have had questions. One young woman wouldn't come to school because she was worried about this, and we got her to come to school. I visited Cielo and talked a bit about that because we have a fairly substantial Spanish-speaking population. And I think the others have addressed the transgender issues. For me, it's when you see something like that, it's a fundamental disconnect from what our public schools look like right now across the country. Maybe not in certain parts of the country, but our schools are highly diverse, and they're populated by students from all over the world. And the thinking around this, I know there's the way it's been articulated, but the way it's moved out and spread into the community is what's really damaging. And I think that disconnect of what our schools look like does not help at all. And that's a problem, and I think it'll continue to be a problem with the current administration and quite possibly with the new Secretary of Education, who has had not much experience with public schools. And I think that people need to recognize that our schools have changed, they look differently, and we need to interact differently with our school communities.
Vicky, did you have anything to add?
Well said.
I think I was listening. I can't remember who made the comment, and it was on an evening news program, and it was almost an offhanded comment about the deportation strategies that are currently being implemented, and one of the panelists just kind of quietly said, "And can you imagine being a child coming home from school and your parents aren't there?" So it's the minor children who are born in the United States, who are U.S. citizens, who may have parents who are undocumented, who really they're at risk for being legislatively orphaned, for lack of any other word. So have you had any discussions about those how are you supporting children in your communities that, potentially face this kind of a challenge?
Well, I would say that it's kind of become a call to action in a lot of ways, and in some ways that might be a positive thing. That we talk about voter apathy, when elections roll around, and I'm very curious moving forward how we might see that change, because if you watch what's happening across our country, you're seeing more people engage. Because of the calls and concerns we were receiving from families, last night we hosted approximately 40 of our Spanish-speaking families, and we invited a local immigration lawyer to come and be the featured presentation and take questions. One of the questions wasn't for her, it was for me as a superintendent, and it was, how does the school handle a situation where parents are suddenly picked up and taken to the detention center in Tacoma? What happens to the kids, and what do you do? And so we talked about, well, that's why we ask for emergency contact information from you, and we encourage you to keep that up to date. But in the event we couldn't get a hold of anybody, we obviously have the safety and welfare of those children in mind, so we would have to engage Child Protective Services at some point. But it was kind of sad to hear a dad have to raise his hand and ask that question.
We have a Spanish teacher at Yelm High School who came into the country from Mexico, and her parents were illegal immigrants. They've since become U.S. citizens, but she talks with staff and students a lot about the nature of being new to a country and having all the barriers of language and citizenship and those kinds of things. And it's really, the approach has to be person to person, one student at a time, trying to find out exactly who is concerned, who has these anxieties and fears. And it really takes every educator, not just teachers, but everyone that's working with kids to make sure that they know every kid's story. And then where we can, we'll apply supports, mostly information right now, that our schools are safe, they're welcoming, and kids can be there, and their families are welcome to come support their kids at school.
Great. Anybody want to add anything? Okay. Well, let's move on to early learning. That is a topic that I have a personal interest in. I have family members who are educators in early learning. So tell me about early learning opportunities and programs and what's going on in your districts. I'm going to start with Dick on this one, and we'll work our way around.
We have a strong early learning program that's focused on preschool, and we have some special programs for birth to 3. And we have approximately 9 preschools across the district. What we're experiencing now is those preschools are really filling up with kids who have special needs. We try to have a balance of special needs students with typically developing peers to make a nice mix. And we're finding more and more students who have special needs. And so we're going to have to figure out where we're going to go next. And we're just embarking on a study. We have some people visiting our district in March where we'll do a series of focus groups with our preschool teachers, our community, our principals. Our kindergarten teachers are a big part of that as well. With full-day kindergarten, we're happy to have full-day kindergarten, but we're really finding some challenges with kindergarten readiness. And not all students who enter kindergarten have been in preschool. So we have invited the city to be a part of this conversation as well, because we think there's a vested interest in our community, in the health of the community. So this study will take most of March, and then we will have some presentations about a roadmap ahead, not just for next year, but 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Does Olympia want to be the kind of place where the city and the schools partner on early learning? How do we drive out information and the expectations of what kindergarten looks like now? So we feel good where we are right now. We think we can make some improvements, but this study will really point us in a direction that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, we did a similar study last year that really had us look at it community and school-wide. Currently, we have 14 classrooms. We serve about 300 kids, students, and then we have an integrated model also. So we're actively partnering now with Head Start and ECAP to expand our service, because we know there's about 400 of our students that aren't receiving any type of schooling that could. And despite all that, when we did our assessment of WA Kids assessment in kindergarten, our students are probably 11 points higher than other students in the state. So we feel good about that. That's a good thing, but we know that this is an area we need to focus on.
Okay. John.
Like North Thurston, we're working with Head Start and ECAP. They forecasted that approximately 120 preschool-age children currently aren't being served. That's based on census data. So we jumped right on that this year as part of our new strategic plan. One of our 6 goals is focused on early learning. And so we recently we're able to confirm that we're going to be able to add 2 new Head Start ECAP classrooms, one at Peter G. and one at Little Rock Elementary, one of the more rural sections of our school district where there's a significant need. And so expansion is one part of that goal. The other thing is identification. So you can use census data, but that's more theoretical. So we're developing and have developed now an early learning partnership team. Dick mentioned partnering with the city. Well, they're part of that, but also the Child Care Action Council, our Head Start ECAP partners, ESD 113 folks, and we've discovered they all have data. And so one of our projects is, well, can we share and find out where we have some overlap and then identify those families. And another simple thing we're taking a look at is when a family comes and registers their kindergarten student, simply asking, do you have some younger siblings, and folding that into our database so we kind of have an ongoing internal database to figure out how many are coming, and then some outreach around, are you in preschool and how can we line you up with either public or private opportunities.
Very
Brian.
similar themes in Yelm that have already been talked about. The one initiative I'd point to is we adopted a new elementary literacy curriculum this year, and we've gone through a very overt process of getting preschool materials that from that adoption into the hands of our preschool programs throughout Yelm. So those are private or public, just trying to get literacy education and literacy materials out to those so that when the students do move into the curriculum in the schools, that it looks similar, some of the approaches are similar, and it allows our kindergarten teachers to do workshops with preschool providers to say, here's what you can do to help get your child more, or this child more ready for kindergarten.
Great. That's good to hear. I think a lot of people may not recognize the opportunities that are available through the public school system for early learning. So it's good to hear that you all have such robust programs. So, well, let's move on to some new initiatives and programs. Vicki, I'm going to start with you. So
Well,
what's new in North Thurston?
Well, we have a new superintendent this year, and as a result
And
of
we've
that,
met her.
Yeah, she's wonderful. As a new superintendent, we're embarking on a strategic planning, and we're involving the community and staff in that. A real big part of the strategic planning is really student voice. We know that students are the #1 source of information about education, so we want to capture their voices and make sure their voice is heard in the strategic planning. So students are now advisors on our school board. We have 4, 2 each semester from each one of our high schools. We've also started a student advisory council from every 5th grade, 8th grade, and 12th grade school student from every school, and they meet quarterly to discuss a variety of issues around school climate and compassion and technology. And really what they tell us is that they want us to hold them accountable, but make sure they don't fail. And so we're including that within our strategic plan.
Good. What's new in Tumwater?
Well, we launched our new strategic plan. I mentioned the early learning goal. We also have a whole child goal that's focused on addressing the barriers kids and families face that get in the way of them fully benefiting from education. And so this year we've expanded our community schools model with the Together organization. And what that program does is places staff from the Together organization in our schools who work alongside our teachers and counselors to identify kids and families in need, and through a variety of methods address those needs. An example this year is now in 7 of our 10 schools we have clothing closets and food pantries along with hygiene items that are in a discrete location where kids come when they have needs and simply take what they need. And we've partnered with service organizations like Tumwater Rotary to restock those shelves. And our goal is by the end of the year all 10 schools will have their own resource center, if you will, for kids and families to access that way. So that's something new that we're really excited about. On the safety side, we've added a second school resource officer in Tumwater that now serves primarily our middle schools and elementary schools. And then construction, we did pass the bond like many of our partner districts here, and we were excited to open Peter G. Schmidt this year. On the horizon is a brand new Little Rock Elementary that will open this fall, and then 2 new middle school wings because we're taking our 6th graders and moving them into middle school this coming fall. So a lot's happening on the construction side.
Yeah, I drove past the new Peter G. Schmidt. Beautiful building,
Yes.
beautiful facility. So what's new in Yelm?
Our board just recently passed a new 5-year strategic plan that's very exciting for our school district. It's a very positively worded plan that emphasizes kids and their growth and making sure that upon graduation that they have a lot of choices in their lives ahead of them. One of the 5 goals of the strategic plan really deals with the growth that we're experiencing in Yelm. And we're working very hard. Like Tumwater, we're planning for next year will be a K-5 elementary district with 6-8 middle schools and a 9-12 high school. And that's required significant facilities work at the high school to get ready to become a 1,600 student high school. That's going extremely well. And we also have 2 very large curriculum adoptions, elementary literacy and then secondary math, and they're both going very well. Our teachers are working incredibly hard to teach in some very similar ways, but also in some different ways that really emphasize getting students to engage in their own learning more, talk more in class, engage as their own evaluators of their work, et cetera. So we feel really good about where we're at, and we found that our community is buying into some of the messages about, yes, Yelm is changing. It's changing rapidly. We'll be over 6,000 students here within 2 years, and just planning for that. And so we're finding a lot of energy.
Great. Dick, what's new in Olympia?
I'll start. Some things our work is big picture. You
Yeah.
heard about strategic plan, and then some of it is really nuts and bolts. So I'll give a couple examples of each. On the big picture side, we're beginning our work to really define what equity and access looks like in our school district for students. It's a big national issue. We alluded to some of that earlier. I think it's a big regional issue. It's an issue in our city. And we want to make sure that our schools have equitable access to all resources, and in some cases more resources than other schools. And what we're really trying to do is to create the vision about that right now with student and staff and community input, and that'll begin this coming month. And we hope to have that done by this spring. Of course, a lot of work goes with that vision on the back end. So we're excited about that. Like Yelm, we adopted a new English language arts curriculum at our elementary schools and at our middle schools that we're very excited about, and it's going very well. Our high schools will also have a new English language arts curriculum next year. I'll mention one more thing. We cautiously look at how technology is used. A lot of districts have invested in one-to-one, and we have experimented this year. We call it a proof of concept as opposed to pilot. We call it a digital immersion, and we tied it into our new language arts curriculum, and we focused it in some of our schools with a higher free and reduced lunch rate. So we've kind of flooded those buildings with technology, provided teachers with about 30 hours of intense learning opportunities, professional development on how to integrate technology into your classroom. And we've made Chromebooks available to our students. And I'm really excited to see where that ends. We get a final report here. We're really excited about what we're seeing in the elementary classrooms and how teachers are engaging kids in different ways with technology. And if the proof of concept proves well, we will expand that to a little bit wider region next year. I'm not sure we'll ever really get to that sort of notion of one-to-one. I think a lot of people were really interested in that.
a lot of
I think they've
technology.
taken a step back, and so I'm really happy with what we've done in that direction. So those would be 3 examples. And the construction, John mentioned, that's always exciting, and lots of different opinions about what the building should look like, could be like. We're working our way through that.
Great. Okay. Let's move on to community partnerships. You mentioned that you have partnerships for your new resource centers with Rotary and Together, and so I'm going to come back to you since you've already mentioned that. But what are some of the really cool community partnerships that are going on in your districts that help you to do things you might not be able to do without those partners? I'm going to start with you, Vicki.
Well, this is our fifth year for having partners in education, and what that means is that over 50 businesses in our community have partnered with our schools, and most schools have 1 to 3 of them. And then we have 2 district partners, and they donate money and time to a particular school, lots of volunteer hours.
Are there particular things that is, or particular projects that
Yeah,
helps with?
like for instance at Pleasant Glade Elementary, we have a Rotary group that does some literacy projects with them, and they donate books and they come in and read to the kids, and they're involved in lots of literacy programs. So it really varies by school depending upon what the school needs are and what the interests that the business community has. It's our 14th year with Lacey Loves to Read, and we just wrapped that up last week. And that's been highly successful. We bring in as many of you know, we bring in a nationally recognized author for young children, and we distribute books, and that author speaks at a variety of different events within the school and within the community. So that's awesome. And the city and the school district is involved in a compassionate community events, and each school really does a lot of activities around compassion and what compassion means. So that's a huge, huge part of our district.
That's something that we
Culture.
really need. Dick, community partners.
Yes, we're grateful for partnerships in a number of ways. The Chamber, Thurston County Chamber, is a great partner. Without going into details, the Math for Life, which will be happening here very shortly. Springtime, kids go out and solve real life math problems with businesses. Find Your Future is a program that happens every other year. Sort of think of it as a massive career fair. We have a Business to Youth Connect project with them where our students can, through technology, access business leaders in the community, ask questions about careers. YMCA, Boys and Girls Club have always been great partners. We have a unique relationship with the City of Olympia Parks and Rec, and I think a really healthy one and a good model for lots of communities. We share our fields and our gyms, and they help maintain our fields. It means the city doesn't have to buy new fields. And we're really proud of that relationship, and I think our community appreciates that from a tax perspective, that we can share those facilities. I would like to give a shout out to our foundation as well, and a plug for the play Annie that is now, it opened last night at Olympia High School. And over 20 years, the foundation has worked with teaching staff and students to present a play. And it's a very unique idea. And our foundation has just been a great partner in multiple ways. Everything from making sure our 5th grade students had outdoor education, to teacher grants, to after-school math support, just a tremendous group. So,
Great. Brian.
This is an area that's been dominating my work here recently. We're involved right now with a very ambitious project with the City of Yelm and the YMCA organization to potentially bring a YMCA to Yelm. And the school district part of that would be investigating the potential that building could be on what is now school district property, which would be a great benefit to our students. A lot of internship opportunities, a lot of athletic opportunities as well. So we're really excited about that partnership. It's in the study phase. We're also starting to kick the tires on bringing a Boys and Girls Club to Yelm, which is also very much needed. We're very excited about a program that we're working with Joint Base Lewis McChord to bring on-site medical care to students who are connected to the military. We think that we'll get the opportunity to house that at our high school, and then eventually our 2 middle schools at some future time. Another plug, our Dollars for Scholars organization has their giant auction here next Saturday, where we expect to raise about $150,000 for the senior class that comes back in the terms of scholarships. So just a lot of really fun times trying to connect the different pieces of Yelm together. And it just keeps showing us all the time the school system is the center of the community, not in terms of its importance, but in terms of its connectivity to families and the futures of the kids.
Right. John, in addition to the partnerships you mentioned earlier, are there other things you wanted to share?
I would just add that the connections with community organizations have led us, with this community schools model, to really say, how can we coordinate all the wonderful things that go on, sometimes in isolation across our community? And we're finding that people embrace that idea and they welcome yet another meeting to come and meet with us and talk through, okay, we have an early learning goal, so do the 5 of you. How can we join efforts? And we're finding a lot of traction already there just by creating a conversation that is focused on getting things done, not just great ideas. And then I would share that we live in a county that really props up its youth and supports them, and I believe that's why we've all chosen to, come work here, live here, and that's part of what makes Thurston County great. So I could share similar examples of relationships with city folks and YMCA and all those kinds of things, but I would start sharing names and everybody here would nod their head and say,
Right?
yeah,
Yes.
we do that too. So I would just say this is a special community because so many people want to partner on these things for kids.
Right. And you see those partnerships all the time, at events and special projects that are going on. Well, we're coming up to the end of our time, and I always like to give you an opportunity to share an inspiring or special story about something that has touched you or touched the school district since the last time we met. Brian, I'm going to start with you on this one. So anything,
Wrestling is a big deal in Yelm, and we have 2 really inspiring stories where our girls wrestling team just won the state title.
Congratulations.
At the MAC Classic, and it's a fairly new team sport that's really growing in Yelm, and it was really great for our town for them to see some of the success that our boys team has had recently. Also in wrestling, our boys wrestling coach Gaylord Strand, who's been at the high school I think 36 plus years, is going into the National Wrestling Coaches Hall of Fame. And he'll be inducted here locally in Washington on March 16th, and then he'll go later in the year to Oklahoma to be inducted into the National Hall of Fame. So that's a great story. He's retiring this year, but he's going to keep coaching, and that's great.
Congratulations.
And then I
on
think
that.
last thing is our high school and our middle school has long been known for its FFA program, and they were recently named the #1 FFA chapter in the country.
Oh, congratulations.
#1 in the nation, yeah.
I have a personal connection to FFA. My cousin is the executive director of FFA of Ohio, so
Nice.
congratulations
Wow.
on that. That's
So-
fabulous. John.
I mentioned community schools, so my story comes from that. And Lindsay Bates, who works with Together, identified a student at Tumwater High School who had a serious dental issue, no insurance, and the family didn't have the means to pay for service. She reached out to a local dentist, and that same day he said, "We'll make a spot, bring her down." And in the process of serving her, found that she needed a root canal, which required yet another doctor to get involved. That dentist made the call. Short story, that kid got served. In part because of this model, we're pushing forward now to say that's a significant barrier if you're in pain, and it's one small example among many that we continue to see with this project. So it moves you that happens in public schools, but Brian said it earlier, our kids all come to this place called school. Why not leverage that with these other services that are out in our community?
Right. Well, thank you. Vicky, how about you?
We had a student this year on our school board, as I said earlier, and she began her school career as a immigrant to our school district as an EL learner, an English language learner. And just to see her progress from the time she joined our school district until her leadership on our school board was really touching. The other example I want to give is that in teaching and learning, we've really made science a priority at the elementary school, and it's often hard to find time to fit science into the curriculum. And so we're doing field studies for every grade level at K-5, and in our kindergarten kids this year as attended a farm kind of event with one of our community partners. And we were able to do our Walk Kids, some of our Walk Kids assessment as a result of that experience. So that was wonderful.
Congratulations. Dick.
Marshall Middle School honored the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and tried to put the bigger picture into action and had the first ever day of service. And so middle school kids, who oftentimes are focused on themselves, went out into the community. All of our students and staff had a 2.5 to 3 hour day of service. Everything from going to Latins to prepare eggs for the community egg hunt, putting together food baskets for the homeless, working at the food bank, cleaning out invasive species from ponds. And then they came back and reflected with each other about what they learned and how they felt, which is really important. That's that component of service learning. We know that it really impacts kids. And I think we're really happy with the results of that and pleased that our students at Marshall were able to honor Dr. King in that way.
Well, congratulations. Well, I want to thank you all for taking time again out of your busy schedules to join us here at the Superintendent's Roundtable. I think we're going to have one more meeting before the end of the school year, so we'll see what happens with the legislature. I hope we'll have something to talk about by then, but you never know what's going to happen there. So thank you again for joining us, and we will see you all again a little later this spring. And for all of you, if you're the parent of a preschool child, please read with your child 20 minutes a day. It's one of the best things you can do to get them ready for their education. And while you're at it, throw in some counting and number games to get them interested in math. If you're the parent of a school-age child, get involved with your child's education. There are numerous ways that you can volunteer at your school. Talk to your child's teacher or the principal at your child's school, or go to their website to find out about volunteer opportunities and how you can participate. For all of us here at the Superintendent's Roundtable and for Thurston Community Media, I'm Deborah Vinsel. Thanks for watching.